the challenge, which is a very interesting challenge, is that because the truth is that you make the work and maybe you have some ideas that these works are in a series or they all come from a kind of same place somehow. But as soon as you have a space to think about the work within the context of the space, suddenly things change because you need to kind of pull the works together in that context. And I found that a very interesting challenge to rethink my work, how to place them in the space, how to put together, and what other things do I need to kind of in a way pull together the ideas that I want to express or explore.
And I mean, maybe it's not necessarily a secret that you're an architect.
Yes.
And also
yes.
an architect. And I just wonder, when it comes to space and when it comes to occupying space and when it comes to thinking about space, have you learned something new? And have you discovered something that maybe architectural education or architecture never taught you, but that this process of maybe putting pieces of work in relation to one another in a space had taught you?
Yeah, I think, I mean, something that I don't know how I can connect it to architecture, but it's definitely space related, and it is kind of related in that sense. But I think because I make these works in a very different space, the space is much smaller, much tighter. Even when I pull out all the works together and try to look at them together, the relationship together is very tight. But as soon as I bring them here, it's a different story. Even the way I look at my work kind of changes and become different. So I think something that I had as a kind of, I had this possibility as soon as I have the parameters of this space to somehow predict those things. Kind of, you can draw the space or make a model of the space and imagine the paintings, but as soon as they come to the space, I think I realized this is a different challenge, even installing them on the walls, and even the fact that the walls are not straight, or I mean, all the challenging of the installation, or how the works talk together, or you kind of explore the ground floor and then come up, you're bringing something of what you saw downstairs with you upstairs. So I think these were interesting challenges or things that I kind of learned to look into a lot more.
Mm-hmm. And so here we have two spaces.
Yes.
And so you are actually talking about them in, I guess, quite architecturally, and maybe later on we'll talk about spaces that are in your paintings. But what are these two spaces and how they connect?
So there is a kind of there's an overall theme of exploration for me, which is kind of trying to somehow explore possibilities of reconsidering the relationship between control and freedom. So downstairs there is a series which I call it Capital Gardens, which I kind of have these 2-3 years of research and collecting materials regarding private gardens in London, which kind of gave me the base to start the series. And upstairs is a series which I call it Overflow, which is more intimate and internal. But what happens in both of them is that they both, in both I'm trying to look at these notions of control and freedom not as necessarily oppositional forces, but some kind of forces which are interwoven and interrelated. So, for example, control is always coming with some constraining limits and constraining forces, but these constraints give opportunity and give rise to somehow new form of freedom. And conversely, freedom is also is always in some form of a tension with its own limits, and kind of trying to always liberate itself from limits that are imposed on it. So I guess in the series downstairs, I'm using more this idea of transgression, which I think private gardens are interesting, because private garden, the root of the word garden is coming from, it's rooted in a word which is hortus gardinus, if I'm right, and it means enclosure, but it's also suggesting ideas of growth and influence. So it's a space that suggests this kind of privacy that allows you to be free. But so yeah, I think mainly I'm looking into this space as some form of a psychological space where transgression can happen, and then how this transgression can inform ideas or explore ideas of autonomy, authority, power, vulnerability, and or even kind of change my relationship and understanding of themes like submission, resistance, or submission, resistance, or negotiation in a way. So here on the top, these works, I'm using the same idea but with excess, when things kind of, whether objects, materials, or or spaces kind of get out of control and kind of exceed their boundaries, their defined boundaries. I think this is also a kind of a situation that offers this opportunity of exploration with these themes.
It's almost something that happens to a garden when it's not attended, when it's let to just be.
Yes, absolutely. Or also, it's very interesting because gardens are, like one thing about the garden is that, yes, exactly, because you nurture it and kind of trying to. One thing is that it's a space that you use it and kind of it's a nice space, but the other is exactly the.
I mean, because always the excess. I mean, I had such a learning curve when I first started buying plants, and I realized that my over care, like my excess of care, was leading to their death constantly. So I was constantly killing my plants because I was just watering them all the time, and and I think there's something kind of almost something like that in,
yes, absolutely.
in this
also,
work.
Yes, also the relationship between the plants, like plants can be invasive, plants can take over each other, you can't, I mean, of course or traditionally or historically, especially in England, there is a very kind of there is a big history of bringing in plants which are decorative and kind of design and keep control of the look of the garden, which is always kind of expression of power and influence and reach in a way, because but we have also this history of these plants becoming invasive. Like, for example, this piece that I have on the stair is of a plant called rhododendron, which is it's a plant that came to Britain.
It's the carpet. It's the carpet.
Yes, it's a plant that came to Britain, I think, late 18th century, and although it didn't come from colonial states, but at that time it was very kind of common to bring this transplantation and bringing plants from different countries as decorative marvels, as they call it.
As the sort of exotic.
Exoticism and the rich, and like they were usually coming very quickly to big garden states of aristocrats, or I don't know, whoever could afford having a garden, and they were showing kind of the influence, the reach, how far they can travel, and this kind of stuff. But this specific plant, which came here as a kind of a decorative plant, and it was largely used in aristocrat states as a kind of a hunting because it grows very fast, and it's very beautiful, has really beautiful flowers as well. So today it's one of the most invasive plants in Britain. There's a lot of issues because it kills all the native plants and not only the plants but also the ecosystem of the kind of ecosystem that is kind of related to the growth of the native plants. So,
so there is so I think that I think in what you're describing here, there is also something that I recognize in your paintings, and it's a question that I always ask myself when I look at them. I always feel like the characters or the well, let's call them characters in your paintings are wrestling, and they're either wrestling with like there's like some, to me at least, and you know, maybe someone else they're like hugging, or to someone else they're dancing, or maybe to someone else they're having sex. But to me, I think somehow they're wrestling, and you know, in the way that you describe the plant that is a sort of exotic plant that becomes a nuisance. There's like almost like we're wrestling. There's like a wrestling involved with our sort of systems and processes of, you know, engaging with the world and with each other. So I don't know. Do you ever think about that?
Absolutely, especially for the series downstairs. I did an extensive research and drawing practice on wrestling, even looking at the history of wrestling in the paintings. And wrestling is a very interesting notion because mythologically and historically, it's a kind of a rite of passage in a lot of cultural, if you look at the cultural mythologies in different places. And there are some ethics attached to it always, you know. It's also it's a very direct way of physical negotiation. You know, it's actually a physical negotiation, and I think because I mainly using bodies and figures, not to directly tell a story, but kind of work with the feeling that because when we see a body, we can immediately, it's a very direct way of feeling something. So yes, I think wrestling is something that you can that I can say I definitely look into, and
as a form of negotiation. But I guess there is some form of respect in wrestling, because
it's also it's difficult. It's also, I remember when I was a child and I was looking at, you know, in a like TV wrestling. It's there's something erotic about it as well. You know, like it's a very confusing physical kind of I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you experience it yourself. Is probably even more confusing as a kind of an act, because you're very intimately kind of use your body with another body, but it's that, you know, there is a negotiation happening which can be I don't know, aggressive, or it can be, I don't know, gentle. It depends on the situation. So
and is the act of painting also a form of wrestling? Are you wrestling with the canvas? Are you wrestling with the...
It's definitely a negotiation. It's a very kind of a very sometimes painful negotiation, to be honest with you, because what I find is that it's very difficult to plan things, because painting has its own autonomy in a way, and kind of challenges, because of its autonomy, it kind of challenges your authority, and then there is always this dialogue that you constantly have in the process between which is, yeah, you can call it a wrestling.
But so you're saying that painting becomes what it wants to be?
Absolutely. I mean, what I like and always kind of think about for myself as big differences between, for example, architecture and painting, is that in architecture we kind of really, our tool is planning and predicting, because we kind of trying to make all the predictions of something that is yet to come. But in painting, even when I go with the idea and planning something, it never goes to the plan, because things changes on the space of the canvas has its own say, and I need to submit to it sometimes or negotiate with it. Like, for example, a good example to give is that if I work with reference images, then I have a dialogue between the reference image that I'm working, or reference images that I'm working, and what's happening on the canvas. So yeah, there is definitely a huge battle that is that is ongoing, and I think as soon as it's kind of feel resolved, you feel there is something wrong with the painting. So when things are resolved, or when things are very clear on the canvas, then it means it's not working and something needs to change, or
so all of these paintings are in some ways unresolved. You can say that. I think if they stay in my eyesight, I would change them forever. I mean, yeah, I think it's an ongoing conversation in a way, but there are moments that you feel they're okay and they can go away, and but about this resolving that I was talking, it's more related to whether the image that is kind of appearing on the canvas clear, or whether it's confusing. So it's more related to that. So if it's kind of very clear of what is this space, what is happening in the image, then there is something that I'm not very comfortable with. I need to feel the uncomfort of confusion, of not knowing what is exactly happening in the... So you're saying you don't know what's happening? You can't know fully
yes,
what's
I
happening?
need to be confused. That's because it loses its point somehow when it's kind of become clear, or become obvious in a way, you know.
Mm-hmm. So would you be interested in knowing how people interpret them?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes, I am very, very much interested, but I also in a way hope that I create confusion for them as well. But yeah, other people's interpretation is always interesting.
Because I guess this question of interpretation and leaving that gap, often, so for example in Susan Sontag's seminal essay against interpretation, she kind of blames the curators and art critics when it comes to kind of interpreting the work too much. But it sounds like basically the artist also has some responsibility to leave space for interpretation in their own work, and I think that's what I'm finding quite interesting in the way that you're
yes,
explaining
I think to be honest with you, whenever I have a chance to share my work with people, or I have a chance or opportunity for them to talk about my work to me, which I find it very interesting, is that what I realize is that, I mean, it doesn't matter what I was thinking or what is my idea behind the painting, because in whatever way that the painting is communicating with someone else, I think that's interesting. I think what is important is that the image or the painting to go somehow beyond itself, to not be only an image that you can describe, but something that leave you with some sort of, I don't know, I think I like uncomfort and being uncomfortable or being confused, and kind of leave you with some questions as opposed to leaving you with some answers. So
one thing that I'm recently in my own research doing is exploring this idea of influence in architectural, in the field of architecture. So I'm making a kind of argument which probably artists in this room will kind of be really upset with me about, but I'm making this argument that architects are much more comfortable with reference, with because architectural language and architectural vocabulary is so prescribed most of the time, whereas artists, many of my friends that are artists as well as artists that I've interviewed over a long period of time, have in many cases sort of refused to acknowledge influences, or actually not necessarily refuse, but also almost just kind of wanting to kind of not participate in that conversation. And I just wonder what's your relationship to influences, and what's your
yes, I totally understand the question.
Because maybe being an architect allows you to have a better relationship with influences within your artistic domain.
I think
if you see what I mean.
I think the way I see it, I think if I talk about people who I know that are painters, for example, or artists, they always have kind of some way they always referring to some sort of historical things that happen in the arts. I mean, for paintings, I think it's super important because, for example, in case of my work, I had to look into a lot of paintings that has been done before, because there's also this very big history of, I don't know, people, a group of people, for example, being in a garden in paintings. You can see in paintings of, I don't know, things that you can find in National Gallery here, Titian, Rubens, or I don't know, even Cézanne has a lot of kind of paintings like that. But I think what is important, it's very important to look into other people and get inspired by them. But for me, it's more when this looking into other people's work, allowing me to be self-critical or critical of certain things. I'm not necessarily just critical to oppose things, but to challenge certain ideas and to and I think if you want to even break some rules, you need to understand the rules of that are exist in a way to be able to. So I think no, influence is definitely very, very important. And the other thing is that the most contemporary people who are working in the same field, for example, it's very important to see what they're doing. And I mean, a lot of the time when I see something that is inspires me, I need to go and copy it in some ways. And from that copying comes my own language of doing things. So I think, yeah, influence is very important. I don't know if that answers you.
It does, and it makes particular sense in relation to the medium, which is the medium of painting, which is a kind of established artistic medium. That's, of course, there's something in the technique, presumably, as well, that is knowledge that is kind of transgenerational knowledge.
Absolutely.
But maybe then we could then talk a little bit about other forms of other media that you use in your practice, whether those things maybe are escaping this lineage of technical or conceptual thought, let's say. So we in this exhibition there's a sculptural work, there is a video work that I don't know if everyone has seen. It's quite hidden, and that there is again I'd maybe call it a sculpture installation that's on the stair. So can you maybe talk a little bit about these other mediums and why they're important, and whether they also maybe allow some form of expanding of what's...
Absolutely. And so I think the way I think about putting up an exhibition is putting up creating a space, which is there is a space, maybe internal space, that I want to express it. And I kind of generally really am very much intrigued and interested in this kind of fragmentation, multidimensionality of our spatial experiences. And I think it's not that I only want to do that, but I think this is something that I myself think about, so there are things that are require time, they're time-based, and I think painting as an experience for a painter is a time-based, but as an experience for a viewer might be not really time-based. But there are other mediums that can be used in that sense. And I don't know, I also work a lot, even in my preparation for paintings, I do a lot of digital, I use a lot of digital tools. And my form of research is I kind of create my personal, in a way, archive of certain subjects or certain internal space that I have, that I kind of put it together, and then from that other things of course come out, which I just think about how to put them together. For example, in this case I was thinking about a way to use the space, to kind of invert the space downstairs as a garden, and I thought about these turf rolls, because they're kind of they're interesting because they're mass produced, and they're kind of produced in another place, and then they cut them and then they roll them, and you can buy them in rolls. But they also have this physical kind of bodily feel to them. And then the videos, I think, for example, the video is something that I again collect a lot as some form of research, or I don't know, some sort of research or some sort of sources for other things. I don't think when I collect things, I too much think about what this gonna be, and then later if it becomes useful in some ways, I don't hesitate to use it in a way.
We talk a lot about archiving with our students. We teach together, and I wonder whether there is a kind of there is an archiving process that's happening in the background in your artistic practice?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what are those archives?
So I think what I do is that I collect things that I'm interested, and they kind of I usually store them in a digital format, which is, in our computers is usually like a folder, and this folder is very messy in the beginning, but over the time it becomes organized, categorized, or kind of gradually take shape, or some folders might be shared with other folders. I don't know, there are some form of personal kind of, I call it personal archive, and I think it's a kind of a good way of referring to it for myself, that I somehow form these things which then give me idea to move on to projects.
And fragments of those we can see in the work,
yes,
in many ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I maybe just want to take you slightly back in time, and I mean, and I just kind of explore a little bit how maybe my first impression of you comes into this work. I remember when we first met, I thought you were very mysterious.
Okay.
And I just want to talk a little bit about mystery. I mean, I also, when I came into the space a few days ago and saw the paintings for the first time, I also felt that similar sense of mystery to the kind of mystery when I first met you. So I don't know, is this something intentional, or do you feel mysterious, or are you excited about mystery?
Maybe I'm just myself very confused, and this confusion express itself as a mystery. I don't know.
So it's confusion that
yeah, and I think I don't I'm not trying to pretend that I'm not confused, or I think life and the world and everything around us is extremely confusing. It's very challenging to make sense of things, and maybe I just don't try to make sense of things, and maybe that come across as, I don't know, mysterious, or I
mean, we didn't really discuss how this is going to go, so I don't know if Raha is comfortable talking about these things, but I remember you told me how when you first came from Iran to London to study at the AA, how little you knew, and how important David Green, a teacher at the AA and a former member of Archigram, was in terms of giving you these references every week.
Yes.
And he kind of recognized maybe some kind of level of lostness, and then
maybe, yeah. I mean, I absolutely didn't know much about. I mean, I knew as much as, I don't want to pretend, I knew as much as I could find in some books, which are not like, at least at my time in Iran, was not massive references, like not much galleries or seeing work in flesh. It was something totally new for me when I came here, and I think it was, and it's very funny, at that age you think you know everything, you know a lot, but there are some, I think I was very fortunate that I had this kind of a couple of conversations with David, for example, that I realized, there is a world that I have no idea about, and he was kindly giving me references, which was kind of, I could not only find in books, but also here I had the opportunity to go and see things in museums or galleries, or
and did that change, or how did it change your relationship to Iran? And did you then start to because sometimes I mean, I'm also an immigrant coming from another country, but I feel like this kind of the new cultural environment that we find ourselves in also, of course, allows us to revisit for better or for worse, the environment that we come from. And you know, yes, we could say that, well, there is simply a lack of information, there is less information, this is the center of the empire, the language that's spoken by so many people around the world, and just in that there is this access of information, that's through that you have access. But has that helped you in some way rediscover
Absolutely.
your appreciation of certain things? And I wonder, what are those things?
Yes, absolutely. I think the most important thing that I learned when I came here and studied here, I don't want to, I want to take the credit of that to myself, but I think it was mainly learning how to learn things and how to become, what does it mean to be interested in something, and what does it mean to kind of be curious about something. Yes, there are so many things. Actually, one of the things that I extensively become interested long after I came here about back Iran was kind of mythologies, for example. I was looking at, I wouldn't call it Iranian mythology, because I think the mythology is a kind of a much more how to say, a live and connected phenomenon. And I think that I would say regional mythology was something that I kind of found myself very interested, and I realized I don't know much about, and it was very difficult because it was not my expertise, so I had to dig for a very long time to find right resources to read about it and kind of get interested in it. Also, of course, I looked back into visual arts and history of art in a way completely differently.
And is that kind of curiosity and that reflectiveness of one's own past, is that something that we can also find evidence in this work?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the source of everything, the beginning, the seed of everything is always some sort of feeling. And the feelings that are important are usually the feelings that you bring from somehow childhood, or something that insists on appearing, and you kind of, they kind of somehow unresolved. Yes, I have a lot of these feelings. When I come across them or think about them, then I have to usually, especially in terms of my paintings, I usually have to visually somehow refer back to try to investigate them. I can give you some examples to clarify, but it's something that I don't like to much talk about, because I think the background of a painting is independent of the painting, and it's not very important. But when I was 6, I have this memory that I was watching TV, and at that age, when I was that age, Khomeini, who was the leader of the revolution in Iran, religious basically leader, he died, and they were televising this funeral. And I was 6 on my own, sitting and watching. It was a very overwhelming. I really don't know. I still don't know how to kind of describe or explain my feeling that I was experiencing. But the thing was that the funeral was very crowded. Like, a lot of people were there, mainly men in black, like you know, and. His body was wrapped in a white cloth, and they were passing the body to take it to the grave. This was televising, and I was watching this. And then there was this crazy moment that things went out of control, and the body came out of the fabric, and this crowd were kind of trying to in a way manage the situation. It was like, you know, it was this person was like a guru of all of these people, and they were there. And as a child, I couldn't. There were so many things that I couldn't understand. You know, like this person didn't have maybe had a different meaning for me, or these people, I couldn't understand why they're so, you know, why they want to touch this. I couldn't even understand very well what the death is, and I was very overwhelmed by this scene. It was something that this feeling, for example, stayed for such a long time. Still today, I sometimes think about it, and when I came here, or when I was making paintings, one of the things that, especially in this series, I started looking back was because there are famous images of this moment, so I referred a lot back to these images, and I kind of try to reread them, or kind of looking at them, and yeah.
I mean, that's so like deeply cultural. It's such a deeply cultural thing that happens as a kind of result of one culture. But then when you look at the work, let's say on this floor, I think maybe there was like an element that was part of it, but somehow it transcends the culture.
Yes.
And so maybe we go back to what you were saying earlier, how there's this almost like a transcendental or transgressive aspect to the work, and this maybe lack of clarity that allows us to project our own memory or into it. So yeah, that's really interesting. And then can we maybe just talk briefly about one of my favorite paintings in the show, and that's the red painting on the same wall below us. Can we just talk about it? I mean, maybe we can talk about color red.
Yeah, color was something that I really kind of, I mean, it was a very challenging thing on that pen. It changed a lot. If I show you like the process of that painting, it changed a lot from different colors. So I don't know, also the scene and the space. Again, the red was not something that I planned, but at some point it appeared and it was working and it kind of stayed. So I don't have so much authority over that, I would say, but I just think it works. And I mean, I know in a lot of culture, red is kind of reflecting blood, and I don't know, but also it can be seen as other symbols, and yeah, exactly, or excitement, or I don't know. But regarding that painting, I was, this is actually one of the first, it's actually my first big painting that I've ever done. And for this one, I was doing a lot of, how to say, a lot of studies of wrestling before. So I did like a series of drawings that's kind of studying wrestling in different forms. And I don't know, I just had this initial idea, which I did a very small digital sketch for it, to kind of have this garden, but also have this line of people who are gonna be in some sort of relation. But I was working on wrestling, but I didn't want to necessarily, I was hoping to be able to confuse myself in the kind of interaction of them in this kind of moment. So yeah, it gradually formed. I don't know what else I can say, but I think the space of it was very challenging for me, and I kind of the creatures, which was funny. Some people were calling it on the opening monkeys, which was a funny kind of reference, not necessarily what I was looking at, but but it was very interesting.
Well, there is the ambiguity in the characters
Yes.
in your paintings,
Yes.
and presumably it is something that is intentional. There is the
Yes,
ambiguity
absolutely.
of whether they are, or where are they in this evolutionary
Yes.
journey
I
of
think
ours.
I think, especially in regard to that, regarding that painting, I'm constantly so aware of gender, things like you know, like I didn't want to specifically, you know, especially if you kind of start putting people in fight, if you, I don't know, if it's a man and a woman fighting, it can take you somewhere else, you know, or if it's a, I don't know, you know, like, so it's very I was very intentionally trying to move away from having a character that is categorizable in a way, if you can use that term. So this was the only thing that I was intending not to do. I mean, majority of the time, of course, or as much as it's not it's not how to say, suggesting some form of a categorization.
Okay, and maybe my final maybe question or a theme that I think might be interesting, and it somehow comes from that, is maybe your reflection on the art world as it is, the place where almost categorization is necessary in order for work to be read or understood, and what you've just said is like such a clear rejection of that. How do you see the wider context in which you operate as an artist? And do you feel like wrestling in that arena as well? And do you feel...
Yeah, I think there is a, I mean, if I want to kind of think about it now very quickly, is that I think there is a lack of meaningful conversation in the art world for some reason. Maybe, I don't know why, maybe because it's too much nowadays, I don't know, dependent on markets somehow. Or maybe just simply because there are not enough funding to kind of give space to the art to become independent of its role as a product, you know, like and also, yeah, I mean, everything that exists, all, you know, like I don't think this is, I think this is for everyone quite clear that when you read texts about works, or even you sometimes see people works and then you read a text and then you don't really understand why